Hi, I'm Mel Albin. I'll be your host for tonight. And as you know, the Power Hour, for those of you that listen in every week, we do in-depth interviews with artists in jazz and jazz fusion, jazz R&B, jazz soul, jazz rock, jazz reggae, jazz country, jazz gospel, anything where jazz intersects with other genres. We want to bring it to you so you can see the diversity and how much of this is related to jazz, which is a pure American art form. So, we've had so many terrific people on our show, great entertainers, great musicians, great songwriters, great vocalists. But I want to do something different tonight. Tonight we have a very special guest, Myron Ruffin. And Myron is a promoter, manager. He's been in the industry for many years. And I think Myron has such a wonderful group of artists that he represents and promotes and does such a wonderful job. And given the changes in the music industry, I think it's good for a lot of indie artists to listen to what Myron has to say about how you can become successful in the music industry. One of the things that I think we all see is that you definitely need multiple streams of income, because if you're depending on streaming at 0.0008 cents per stream, you're going to be a very poor entertainer. So with that, I want to introduce Myron, and I want to thank everybody for listening in tonight. And I think you'll find this extremely informative and very enjoyable. So Myron, welcome.
Welcome, Mel. Thank you, Mel. I appreciate being welcomed.
Good, good. I just mentioned to everybody, you're the first entertainment promoter manager we've had on the show. We've had musicians and songwriters and vocalists. But I think it's important, Myron, that people get to know you. First of all, I'm not just blowing smoke. You've done a wonderful job promoting some great artists and building artists' careers. And I think, given the fact that we're in the indie stage of music today, I think there's a lot of lessons that can be learned that you can help provide information for. So again, I want to thank you for being on the Power Hour.
Yeah, I appreciate being here, Mel. And again, I thank you for your platform and being able to be a part of bringing much needed music and musicianship to light. We really appreciate you here.
Well, thank you. I thank you. It's very kind of you. The purpose of our station, Source Radio Network, is to promote and to provide a platform for jazz and jazz crossover artists when much of the music industry, I think we lost your picture, Myron. Oh, did you? Okay. As I was saying, the music industry today has just changed so dramatically. So, and it's narrowed. Now you have urban music on most stations. All the jazz stations and blues stations are pretty much gone, and FM is under assault from network internet radio. So it's a very tough market for a lot of people, and I think it's important that people hear from you today. So let me start off by how I usually start off, by asking you, what's up? What are you doing lately, and what's important right now in your world that you're working on?
I've been staying home a lot more than normal. I have a 16-year-old who was in high school, and I have been sort of his glorified gopher or chauffeur. He is a excellent student by the name of Myron Ruffin. Is my son, and he also is an excellent athlete as well. Standout athlete. He just finished with his basketball season, and we made it to the district semifinals of his team, and he played very well in the semifinals game. And he also got hurt in that game, but he played through it, and now he's nursing an injury and getting ready for AAU basketball. But between that and my many other endeavors, more so than anything else, is just staying busy and being one of the lead brokers for the City Winery franchise and bringing them talent through, as well as being a manager of some exceptional artists, as well as continuing to market music to platforms like yourself. So
Well,
yeah, I mean, I'm turned 50 this year, and so life is a little different. You kind of look at things a little bit differently and look at see what you have accomplished and then what you want your legacy to be going forward. So that's
well put.
phase I'm in. Yep.
Wonderful. Well, I look. We have a lot of things to discuss. We're going to play some music from some of the artists you work with and continue to work with a little bit later in the program. But I kind of want to start by letting people get to know more about you. You grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. Is that correct?
That's correct. I hear somebody else is from Cleveland, Ohio too.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time in Cleveland. I lived there for 10 years.
Right. Hmm.
So we're brothers.
Correct.
So tell me a little bit about your childhood. You got into music at some point. Was your childhood influential, or your family in your musical development?
I'll be the first one to tell you I know how to play the spoons. That's all I know how to play as far as music is concerned. but I grew up hearing some of the most extraordinary music ever made, which was in the 70s. I had a brother that was oldest brother that was my oldest brother Maurice he's 14 years older than I am, and he had one of them old stereo receivers that he still owns to this day, if I'm not mistaken, from 1976. Still works, still quantifies the same way in terms of sound. I also had a brother that was 9 years older, Mitchell, who had his form of musical taste. And then there was my sister, Michelle. She's 8 years older, and there was me. So I was the last of four kids, and I was the last by a mile. But we also had a guy in the neighborhood who I often talk about. Every neighborhood has this one black guy that likes rock music, and he is kind of our he's kind of our educating source. He likes rock, he likes jazz, and he likes a lot of different stuff. And the shout out to Derek Gideons, but he was that guy that introduced us to Journey and Phil Collins and REO Speedwagon and Kiss. And we every community has that one guy that he kind of lives on a different frequency than everybody else. And Derek was that guy. He was an exchange student. He went to Chile, and he was my brother's best friend. And like his family, his brother Sylvester was a good friend of mine, and his mom Elvira actually took me to the second concert the second concert I ever been to in my life. And that was the Front Row Theater. It was a jazz band and a group from Tonga called the Jets. You remember them?
Sure. Yeah, Myron, if I can ask, can you raise your camera because part of your head is being cut off?
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm trying to control this thing here, and whatnot.
Better now.
Is that okay?
Yeah, it's better.
I think I'm going the wrong way. There it is.
Now you got it. You're good.
All right, cool. All right. Hold on, let me move around here for a second here. Just hold on one second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Good. I know among your early influences, you like Fallen Oats also.
Yeah, exactly. Man, you couldn't find a bigger Hall and Notes fan growing up than myself. And from H2O to Big Bam Boom. But, we had him and Derek, as I mentioned, who had that sort of base with my brother. They were best friends. And then there was a show we had in Cleveland that came out of Akron, Ohio, that we watched through snow called 23 Night Videos. It was hosted by a guy by the name of Billy Soul, who it came on. It was on from like 11 at night till like 3 in the morning, and we watched that thing through snow, through AM, FM, or UHF, VHF antennas.
Yeah. Yep.
And that was they showed everything. And then we had a guy who had from the urban side of things at radio by the name of Jeffrey Charles in Cleveland, who had a show called For Lovers Only, which was the Quiet Storm version of what Melvin Lindsay did in DC. And to this day, you can go on YouTube and pull up a lot of Jeffrey's shows, and it was some of the most remarkable music that you could hear as a young person, and again, you look at what young people and the frequency that they're listening to things today, and you listen to the type of poetry that cats that we were listening to growing up, and it's a quantum leap difference, and it just goes to show sometimes the evolution has its cul-de-sac, and that is
Yes.
one of them.
Yeah. You said your musical talent is limited to the spoons. Well, I'm one up on you because mine's limited to the triangle.
Hey, some sort of sound comes from it, right?
That's right. That's right. So
Right.
okay. So okay. What about in public school? Did were you involved with theater, music, anything at all?
Uh, did stuff plays wise at East Technical High School in Cleveland, but it wasn't until I went to East Tech High School. I was just an athlete, and it wasn't until I got to Oberlin College, and it was my freshman year, and a young lady who was from Miami, Florida, by way of Barbados. She was a freshman like myself. We were friends, and she was having trouble in the sciences at the time at Oberlin College. And she said, "Hey, why don't you try your hand at this?" This was the off season. Football season was over, and I needed something to do. She said, "Why don't you try, for stage production and stage management and calling light cues and things of that nature?" And I ended up taking over that responsibility from her. And there was a dance ensemble called Essence that was produced by the dance instructor and professor at Oberlin, Adenike Sharpley. And that became something that I began to do. And it was an enjoyable, it was a break. And it was interesting how so much preparation goes into producing that little bit of magic,
Yeah.
which wasn't long, you know.
Am I correct? Were you also an intern at a record label?
Well, I was doing I was on college board at Oberlin, and we were involved with choosing bands to come and play there, and it was part of just me segueing into from being a co-chair of the Black Student Union. So it was just another responsibility. And then that allowed me my senior year, because once I came back from doing my Woodrow Wilson Fellowship, I needed all of 4 credit hours to graduate. And so, um, in the process of just needing 4 credit hours to graduate, I hadn't have a lot to do my senior year. I came back from my Wilson Fellowship at University of Texas Austin, and that was all I needed was 4 hours. So what I did begin to do was take on college intern stuff that record labels was involved with, and it was just hanging out at the radio station that I became at the school radio stations I became in part with those. The one being Tommy Boy and one being with Warlock Records, and I ultimately end up maintaining those relationships, even like 2 years after college, because I became a person that handled mix show and 12-inch distribution for them and record pool distribution and stuff like that with them.
Did you think of it as a budding career at that point, or were you just hanging out and spending some time?
Well, it became a lot more intriguing to me. I had a lot of friends who were involved with it in the city of Cleveland, and then I began to be approached because I knew I had, I got the degree. I mean, one of the biggest things in Cleveland in the '90s and the '80s that a lot of people don't want to talk about during the Reagan era and during the Clinton era is a lot of cats, in particular African American, if they got into schools for at least a couple of quarters and they were in STEMs or inroads, they got offered to work as interns and offered to work at companies making insane money without having a degree. And then they pretty much came home and told their parents, kiss me where the sun don't shine. And I'm moving out. I'm moving into the burbs, into an apartment. And 25 years later, they were making that same money with enormous amount of debt, no mobility. They may have had a family, they may have had kids, and they ultimately got a chance to see their kids graduate from college before they graduated. Shame that happened, but that was the lure at that time of providing us access, and we weren't, certifiedly prepared. So the good thing was I was able to take advantage of the athlete, going to school, playing football, leaving with a degree. So when I came back home, that was accessible to a lot of people that I had actually had that and, acquired that sort of hazen, so to speak. So thus I began to understand contracts, get into management, understand how records were broken fundamentally. Um, then I became a manager of the group Men at Large, who had a number one hit with Treble Productions and Joe Levert called I'm So Alone. This was after they had that hit. I became their manager, which brought me into contact with one of my greatest friends in the business and a mentor of mine by the name of Ray Calabrese. Now, was Ray was a founder along with Sonny Harris and Sonny Jones, Sonny Jones and Bobby Harris of the group called the Kinsman Dash, which evolved into the Dash Band. Ray was also a radio promotions person and manager as well with Progress Records. So a lot of the artists and acts that came off of Progress Records, he managed them along with the Dash Band. At the time, distribution was regionalized. It was much like your 70s and 80s wrestling. It was regional outfits. And, if you had a hot single in Memphis, the way you got it around was there was distributions that controlled territories, and there was promoters that controlled territories, and you got it to those people. And so thus you had acts like Roger Troutman and Zapp. They could perform in Cleveland 3 or 4 times a year and just hit every city in the Midwest, Cleveland, Buffalo, their hometown, Dayton, Cincinnati, Toledo, and go as far as Chicago all the way over to Buffalo. And they could do that 12 months out of the year without having to go anywhere else. The touring industry was different at that time. And for the most part, everything was off the house. And off the house, the headliner got 60% of 33% that was being paid by the promoter. So promoters paying talent 33%, 60% of that 33% went to the headliner. So take, for instance, Roger Troutman and Zapp, the house is $100,000. Well, the talent got $33,000, and they got 20,000 of that 33,000, which is 60%. Now, in today's money, Mel, that probably is about 60 or $70,000 a show
Yeah.
if you took out your inflation calculator.
Yeah.
So that all became intriguing to me, and me working with talent and acts. And to be quite honest with you, I didn't do a very good job that I needed to do with men at large, because if I was to write a book, I always would say that this was the era that I deserved. The chapter would be, this was the era I deserved to not get paid. And and a lot of it is that um, a lot of it wasn't necessarily meant that I shouldn't have, but the fact is that I didn't understand how to deal with the human acumen as much as I needed to at that time. And there was too much emotion put into the enterprise of what I was doing. And so when I learned to take the emotion out of things and create templates and plans on doing stuff, it was just a simple conversation with an artist or a producer who I was representing. Hey, here's the plan. You might not trust me right now, but if you walk into the plan and the plan is executed and we win, then you will learn to trust me because you've trusted in the plan. That took the emotion out of it for me altogether. And at that point, I did that. I began to do a whole lot of other things, festivals, which I did one in Cleveland for 17 years with Councilman Zach Reed and Kevin Jones and Mansfield Frazier, called Family Unity in the Park Concert and Fireworks, which I had all of the groups of my childhood that I listened to on a stereo. It became full circle. I was able to bring them to perform, from the SOS band to the Parliament.
I was going to ask you about that, whether you really like all the funk bands. Some of those guys are good friends of mine.
Right. Yeah. There was not a bigger fan growing up for the SOS band than yours truly. I love the SOS band.
Yeah.
And the very first record that my parents ever bought me, it was two. It was Off the Wall, and it was Family Reunion by the OJs. Family Reunion was one of those records that will go down in history for me. That was the quintessential record for me, to know that these guys were truly the real deal.
Yeah, I love Cameo and Lakeside. When I was growing up, those are bands I just really loved listening to. And Sly Stone.
Right. Sly was the bad boy.
Yep. Incredible. Incredible. Yeah, Myron, tell me something. I'm just trying to get a fix on this a little bit. Did you kind of just emerge into this career, or did you say out of college, this is what I want to do?
No. Like I said, many aspects of this chose me. And I understood that there was things that I wanted to do in my life. I wanted to have a family, and I wanted to be able to do something that was going to be important for my kids to understand in terms of legacy. I mean, I've always been big on that. I mean, you're talking to a cat that grew up in the same house. We never moved. And we had that house until my parents passed away. And my brother now owns that house. That was one of the houses in the state that he still has. So for me, change was always a difficult thing to understand, and because there was always commitments made to things. And when you're committed to things, you're rooted in it, you're in it. You can see the end of the tunnel, but you don't come out the tunnel.
Yeah.
So for me to come out the tunnel, was a paradigm change. I was always the guy that loved to wear the suits and the ties and look like a Philadelphia lawyer. And I'm the farthest thing from that now. Absolutely. I will dress up when I have to. Um, I'm on it when I need to be on it when it comes to that. But I'm not the cat that is on it all the time anymore.
Yeah,
So,
my mantra today is, "What's a suit?"
right. But the thing about it is that what it put into me is, and I have a very interesting story about this. I was going to meet this extremely popular recording artist. This artist had a record label. I went to New York, and a buddy of mine, God rest his soul, he's not here now, but he advised me in going into this meeting. He was like, "You need to dress up, you need to do this and this," and he had gave me a whole bunch of pointers that was completely unsubstantive stuff, nothing on substance. It was all on form. I went into that meeting and they didn't give a damn about any of that stuff. Nothing. In fact, much of their decisions were made before I even went into this meeting. Only thing was I became threatening to them because I was too polished. And I got so far away from my authentic self in that meeting that I said to myself, you know what? I've got to create instruments and templates on things and plans that will walk in the room and speak before I even speak personally to people. And I've been able to do that. And it had to be a point where I felt like my authentic self had to play out more than anything else, in any circumstances. So I just began to develop that more and more and more. And that more and more I became comfortable with myself in this environment, the more and more artists and producers and agents and promoters and whatnot became comfortable with me. And it just basically helped me develop whatever I say I was going to do, I was going to be able to do it. And that made a lot of people comfortable. And I've been able to be comfortable over a given period of time in my life as a result of that.
Yeah, at one point, weren't you a distribution consultant to Tower Records?
Bayside Distribution was owned by Tower Records at the time. And hold on just 1 second here. Just move something here real quick. Okay. Yeah, Bayside Records was a distributor, was on the West Coast in Sacramento, California. And when a lot of urban artists and hip hop artists, including Prince, when they left major channels of distribution, Bayside gave them a marketing and distribution deal, which meant they advanced them a budget on marketing and distribution. And they put their record out. So they put out everything from the Prince and the Shaka Khan album that he had when she was signed to MPG to Tupac and the Outlaws, and to E40 Slick with it. And so what I did was I was the mix show and record pool coordinator for them, and which I would always get enormous amount of vinyls shipped to my house, and I had to make sure I had to ship them any and everywhere else to where they got played and whatnot. And that was my job. I not only did that for them, but I did it independently too on records that needed to break as well too. Also,
That's great. At some point too. I mean, you've had such a diverse career. Did didn't you become a distributor too for Airpoint Entertainment? Airpay, I'm
No,
sorry.
Earpay had a group called DSU. I was part of the staff with it, and they had a record called Who Ride that had an Al Green loop to it. It was a Earpay was created by record producer Tony Nicholas. That evolved into New Mecca Records, which put out the classic album, first album by a young lady by the name of Conya Doss, a poem about Miss Doss, and that was through New Mecca, which it the name was changed to that, and it put out her first album, which was distributed by EMI and Orpheus Music, and um, it was an incredible album, and it put her on the map. And
Yeah. How
ten
did you?
hours, 10 hours later, she's still doing it.
So how did? So you met her? How?
Met her when we had started producing the first album of hers. There was two producers that I managed in Akron, Ohio. She came down and we met her for the first time. We were trying to get songs on her at that time, and then to match what Tony Nicholas was doing with her already. And so we met her, and then I had to develop, along with Fred Williams and Lenny Berry, uh, marketing strategies for her in getting her career and getting her off the ground. Um,
Yeah. Excuse me. How do you do that? I mean, how do you decide what's the proper approach when you meet somebody like Kanye?
it's a good question. And formulaically, at the time in the music business, when you had airplay on an artist in a particular market, what you made sure that you did was anything within a 50-mile radius of that city, of that market, you nailed down PR opportunities with television and newspapers and any street mags that would talk about music. You nailed down interviews with radio or any other supporting radio stations that could play her. And then you would also nail down retail opportunities. So any other indie retail stores that were in the market, you made sure you made yourself familiar with them, present with them. You took the material and you made sure the overhead in-store airplay was happening in that retail store. So
Yeah.
those were
I'm sorry,
the
Myron. I guess my question is, it's a new artist, and
mhm.
what do you say or do to convince them they should pay attention to this new artist?
It's very simple as it is with an old artist. Hey, we have a great record. Okay, I need you to take a chance on hearing it. It's a great new artist. I mean, with any industry, um, in any business, no business survive unless you at least have 20% turnover of new customers and new artists or new material that's coming in, is being filtered in. And she just so happened to be in that wave of people. And so thus it often started with publicists hearing her, and it often started with trusted individuals and getting a team who had relationships around what was going on with her. And that's how that breaks.
Well, let me play one of her songs, for everybody, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about Kanye. Okay?
Okay, sounds good.
You can say all that I want. In every way, sure love is possible. Erasing the doubts I had in my mind. not anyone. Don't ever change just who you are. Who you are, don't change me, not anyone. Your imperfections, I love it all. I accept every part of you, even your flaws. You can talk to me without using clever words, 'cause I already know what you mean before you say. How good it is to know I can depend on, 'cause you gon' do what it takes to make it alright. Even through good days, in between days.
All right, that's a great track, really great track. You know,
Yeah. In fact, the interesting story about Conya is that she was the first artist to ever be interviewed on the Michael Basin show when he created a segment called the B-side.
oh wow, okay.
Yeah, she was, and that was a station that was a show in syndication. So interesting thing about Kanye is that because of how radio had been so corporate over the years, the very first time that she got played on major radio in her hometown was through that vehicle because it was syndicated. So the very first time that she got played in Cleveland, Ohio was because she was on national radio everywhere else.
Huh. Okay, that doesn't happen often.
Yeah, that's a whole nother episode.
Yeah, definitely. Now, let me play another person that you've worked with closely. Another female vocalist that I love, Miki Howard.
Yes.
So let me play one of her tracks for everybody, and then maybe you can talk a little bit about Miki.
Okay.
I lost all the things I gave away, and when I'm in a certain mood, I search the house and look. One night I found these magic words in a special book. Throw it away, throw it away. Each and every day, keep your hands wide open, let the sun shine through, 'cause you can never lose a thing if it belongs to you. There's a hand that rocks the cradle, to make.
All right, yeah. I went to see Miki at DC Winery last year before it closed,
Right.
and and you know I listened very carefully to how an artist interprets a song, and the thing I found amazing about Miki, she emphasizes vowels. She understands the lyrics in a way. It's not just a song, but she understands it emotionally, and the way she just bends words. I mean, she's so special. Until I saw her live and I could watch her and listen to her closely, I didn't realize what a consummate artist she really is. You know, she has her own unique way of making a song hers. And
Miki came into this at a time where truly, if she had came into this in the 2000s, she would be in Erykah Badu territory.
yep,
Thing
yes.
is, sometimes, and I hear Big Daddy Kane say this about him being a hip hop artist. Had he had the machine that Puffy Combs put around a Notorious B.I.G., he was Biggie before Biggie. I mean, he was the guy that was dating Madonna. Well, you take Miki and you put her into the machine that D'Angelo and Erykah Badu had, because she's essentially was doing the same thing. She is a jazz singer
Yes.
that's had some phenomenal R&B moments.
Yes.
She's
Absolutely.
not an R&B singer that just had a few jazz moments. She
Yes.
is a jazz singer that has had some incredible R&B moments that have been legendary. And that's the thing about her. She is a treasure. And a lot of the other entrappings get known first when it comes to Miki. But that's no different than what we would be hearing about Miles Davis or
Yes.
John Coltrane or Cannonball Adderley back in the day.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so she's an incredibly insightful and smart woman.
Yes.
She has a granddaughter at Berkeley. She's educated her kids and then put them through college. So no matter what you said, people hear and say about her, she is a queen in this business, and it just is a point where she fights fiercely for her recognition, and I fight for her for that. But not only that, she, for the most part, is when artists say who some of their favorite artists are of today that they reference, it's her, and that's where it deserves to be, actually.
Yes. You know what I really respect about people like Miki and Maysa also, they have
That's
a body.
another one. That's
Yes, they have
another
a.
one. I've worked with Maysa her last 4 albums. She's
I love
another
Maysa.
one who
Yeah.
has had. She is a incredible singer that has had. She really is a rhythm and blues singer that has had some phenomenal smooth jazz and jazz moments.
Yes.
She's the inverse of that. But again, if she's coming in to this not just on Incognito's machine, which is a hell of a machine internationally, but if she's coming in during the Hidden Beach era when things were just starting, then you would be talking about her in the same vein as you would talk about Jill Scott. And that's the
Absolutely.
only difference.
Absolutely right. Great point.
Yeah.
Great point. Mesa sang with Pieces of a Dream. I mean, she's been in the smooth jazz and soul
Yeah.
environment, and she's turned out 20 records in 20 years. I mean, that's what I mean about Miki also.
And
It's
see,
not just
and that's an important point you bring up, Mel, there,
Yeah.
in that 20 albums in 20 years, okay? There's nothing to sneeze at with that. These are the artists now, because of the way that platforms are structured, they can put out a single and then new listeners can go and listen to the entire catalog and become fans. And Maysa is one of the artists that comes, and Miki, that can come out of the pandemic because they have such an enormous catalog that they were able to come out creating more fans than losing them.
Yes. Yes. One of the people I had on my show was Brian Culbertson, who also turns out enormous amounts of music.
Brilliant man. Brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the quality of Maysa, Miki, Brian, they turn out this music. And this is what I really respect about them. They're not just one-hit wonders. I mean,
Right.
they are there every single day applying their craft and giving people beautiful things to listen to that really enhance people's lives. That's
And again, I've often said this to artists that normally that I deal with is that in this independent environment, you're not going to be one artist that's going to get hit the lottery hit the musical lottery and sell and have a house for you and your family and your mom and everybody else the first go around. This is a grind, and you have to build volume. with it, and you look up 20 years down the road and you have a career. What you have now is an opportunity first coming into it.
Yeah.
But if you do this long enough, then you will have a career. You'll look back and you'll be able to call it a career.
Yeah.
Because you'll have a touring sketch, you'll have a recording sketch of things, you'll have a catalog of publishing and writing and things of that nature. You'll have assets that you can then borrow off of to sustain yourself and sustain your family, and you can actually pass those assets on. I've had to acquire other revenue streams that are outside of music because I don't write music. I don't produce. I've not been in a studio to produce music. I've executive produced albums because I'm able to deliver an album under budget. But I'm in the studio less and less and less on anything now. I'll go in to listen to a record in a sequence. But other than that, the artists, at least the artists, in understanding the day of the day, have many of those assets that they have at their disposal that they can turn over to their kids.
Yes.
And they can turn over to their loved ones, and it recycles itself, and that's their legacy.
Yeah, one of the things that, again, I admire about, again, entertainers like Maysa and Brian Culbertson during the pandemic when everything was shut down, recording studios were shut down, and gigs were shut down, venues. Maysa started Maysa's Kitchen, and she started doing karaoke.
Karaoke kitchen.
Karaoke kitchen, and Brian started the Hang, and Brian ended up doing something really creative. He had a bunch of subscribers to the Hang, and he actually created a piece of music with them. All the subscribers were able to call in while he was playing and starting to do measures and create a song, and they had input into the song. And when the song was completed, he listed all 200 of the subscribers as co-writers on the song.
Right.
And these people like Maysa and Brian, they create new streams of revenue. They create new fan bases. And they just love what they do, and that's why they're driven, to always find a solution to a problem.
Yep. Exactly. Artists I work with, Nicholas Cole, he was a part of the Hang with Brian Culbertson. That was a good time. I mean, again, these are artists that have committed themselves to the process of their fans, and for 20 and 30 years, they've seen the light at the end of the tunnel, but they have stayed in the tunnel. I often say that to people when you're getting into careers that are cottage industries. You get in, you're lucky to get in. And when you're in, if you're in and you learn everything about how it is that you're supposed to conduct yourself and the acumen you're supposed to portray, you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but you can stay in the tunnel as long as you want to and make a living out of it, and you come out of it when you're ready. Not because somebody's throwing you out the tunnel. It's because it's time for you to come out.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's shift gears a little bit. We've been talking about women. I want to play somebody who you actually have introduced to me that I'm floored by his voice. It's Alex Harris.
Yeah, yes, Alex Harris. Yep, the phenomenal Alex Harris. And before you play Alex Harris, just to set this up, Alex is not only a brilliant artist and singer. He is my business partner for a concert series that we have down in Florida called Live on Central at the Floridian Social Club. I fly down to St. Petersburg, Florida, and we bring artists such as Gregory Porter. We've brought Moonchild. We've had Anthony David, Jay Brown. We've had Algebra Blessed and Reese, and we're amping up when this next fiscal year hits to bring some more incredible talent to the area. But not only that, Alex has had a foundation called the Academy called ACT that's in the Tampa, St. Pete, South Florida area called the Academy of Conservatory for Teens. It basically takes young kids and they learn musical training. They learn how to produce a concert. They learn how to produce a record. And this program that he and his wife have had has existed for 10 years now. And they've had turned out an incredible amount of music professionals. His brother, Swag, is actually a product of this too. And he is the music director for her, the recording artist Her. And tours with her. They both write for her. And Alex is also a graduate of Harvard University. He has an actual PhD from Harvard University.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Phenomenally intelligent guy, has incredible vision, and he comes from a family in Manchester, Georgia, where it was a family of 8, and his father was a pastor, and his mother went back to school with all of the 8 and got advanced degrees, and every one of the kids from a trailer park all have advanced degrees, all 8, including his mother.
Wow.
So he is he's one of the most driven people that I know of, and can verbally undress you as far as the amount of knowledge that he has and how he connects with people. And then oh, by the way, he is like, you see him, he's the next Al Green when you see him on stage and when you hear him.
I was going to say that. I haven't heard a voice like Al Green's this good until I just heard him. And he's from Georgia, which now explains a lot to me, in terms of, his southern roots.
Yep, he's from Manchester, Georgia, and he is Boston. He spent a lot of time in Boston in undergrad and graduate school and whatnot have you in that area, New England area. But he is the next.
Yeah, he does Southern Soul. That Southern Soul is, it lives in him really strongly.
Yeah, so, he and the recording artist, by putting both he and the recording artist Mavis Swan Poole, because she's another phenomenal talent from the South, from Wilson, North Carolina. They're 1-2, and they're 1-2 punch as far as artists that are the next that I'm working with right now.
Yeah, I know Mavis's song "The Assignment" is phenomenal.
Yes, and it's
great song.
Done some amazing stuff out here in the marketplace, and we're just not even reached the tip of the iceberg with her yet.
Yeah,
but you can go ahead and play on with Alex here.
Okay, I'll do that right now. He's, like I said, he's just a phenomenal talent.
Lifetime lover seemed like a long time until I met you, girl. You changed my mind. Take me to heaven every time. More happiness than money can buy. The world keeps spinning around. Oh, yeah, you're the good I've been waiting for, and I won't let go. Yeah. Every day I keep falling for you. And love is everything about you. Every day got me feeling brand new. Yeah, crazy about the things you do. Every day I keep falling, can't resist the falling for you. Every day I keep falling for you. Oh. Just another man from an average town, sweeter than honey, mama, look what I found. In this big world, so much coming at me. Wake up to you is all that matters to me. Let the world keep spinning around, oh, my soul. You're the feeling brand new. I'm so crazy. Yeah. And I can't resist.
It's really incredible. I want you to get him on my radio show.
It'll happen. It'll happen sooner
Yeah.
than it will later. Yeah.
I wanted to mention one thing to you about Miki. Going back to Miki Howard for a minute.
Mm.
When she was on the show, she is so humble. I asked her what it was like, when, to be, nominated for awards. And she said, it's just another day at work. That's what I do. I'm supposed to do it well, and it's
That's the truth. That's the truth.
It is, but it's her commitment to her craft, and that's what I hear. I don't know anything about Alex, but I hear a commitment in the way he approaches a song. It's I guess it's the orchestration. It's his presence. It's something. I look for something special when I listen to somebody like Alex, and you hear it.
Every special artist like Miki and like Alex, they internalize their music.
Yes.
It's like you know how your cell phone is now, where you don't have to remember a number anymore. You just program it and hang. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if anybody that is in tune with people, they can probably remember numbers long years ago, or long before all this stuff started happening. Well, let's revert that over to Miki and to Alex with music. It is encrypted here. It's here. And so thus, whereas in this modern day, people are just putting words together, they are already 10 steps ahead of someone, because that record has become part of their has become part of their makeup, has become part of their everyday get down, their soul.
Yes.
So it's encrypted. And so that's where they are. Many other artists are like that as well, but they just have a methodology where they could be doing 10 things. And because they live these experiences and they understand that it's one song, one note, one beat, one rhythm, one harmony.
Yes.
And it builds into that. They understand the process better than anybody.
Yes. I was talking to Raheem Devon's manager, and he told me when Raheem goes to the studio, he doesn't rehearse. He starts to sing one line at a time until he gets it the way he wants it before he moves on to the next verse. And it's that kind of understanding. He wants to understand and bring out the best in his voice and how it relates to the interpretation of the song. So he doesn't want to come in there all rehearsed. He wants to build it emotionally, as you said, internalize it as he develops the song. Yeah.
Exactly, 100%.
Yeah. Well, let me play somebody who's been out there for a while. Let me back up. I want to play somebody else first. I'm picking and choosing now. I want to play Jeff Bradshaw. Maybe you could tell people a little about Jeff and set it up before I play it. Do you want to introduce Jeff?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, that was my cue.
Yes.
There is nobody more dedicated to the craft of staying busy or his own representation than Jeff. And Jeff is the epitome of, I got an instrument in my hand and I want to get in where I fit in. And Jeff he's a master trombonist. He's a master music theorist. I can bring Jeff in and he can music direct an artist. He can produce a record. He can produce an album. He can go out on tour. He is the one guy that is the ultimate utility guy. And he is a guy, again, even though he has a trombone, he is a R&B soul artist who has had a few great jazz moments before. But at his core, he is what a modern day Quincy Jones would be in this day and age. He can produce records. He plays an art. He can get in the studio, do any and everything, and he stays available. The only thing that I wanted to make sure with Jeff is we put structure around him because he's had health issues in the past couple of years,
Yes.
and so with him continuing to continue to walk the beat and be out here so much, and be pleasant and be humble about it has gotten him a long way. No artist in particular, my phone rings more for than Jeff Bradshaw. And he makes it his business to be any and everywhere, and to, Fred Wesley was his idol, and that's what he's walking in the path of. So that's what I can say about Jeff Bradshaw.
When I had Jeff on, the first thing I asked him, if you're a kid, I don't think you think, gee, I want to be a trombonist. How did you get to the trombone? And he said, because nobody else in the band wanted to play it.
Yeah. And that's the epitome of getting in where you fit in.
Yeah. All right, let me play Jeff for everybody.
And it's almost like telling somebody, hey, they're saying, I don't think I'm very good. And they're like, well, you're on this basketball team, you got a jersey, right? And you got a jersey on, so make the most of you having a jersey on. That's Jeff. Jeff will put the jersey on. He'll be 13th man. Next thing you know, he's 6th man. Next thing you know, he's in the starting lineup. Next thing you know, he is leading team in scoring. That's Jeff.
Well, let me play this for everybody, and then maybe you can make a few comments about Jeff.
Right.
We'll get you a track afterwards.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a great song. One of the things you and I haven't talked about is that so many of these artists are songwriters also.
Yep. And that one, he was able to pull together Raheem Devine on lead vocal.
Yep.
And on piano, Robert Glasper.
Oh, I didn't know Robert Glasper was on the keys. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Hey, that's him on the piano. And that's Raheem on the lead vocals. And he was able to get all three of them together in the video. And again, they come out because it's Jeff Bradshaw, and it's the same if Jill was doing something. If he was doing something and wanted Jill Scott, she'd come because it's Jeff Bradshaw. Marsha Ambrose because it's Jeff Bradshaw, and he has managed to be the grand master of his circus in that way.
Yeah, it's really, really wonderful. Yeah, I really enjoyed having him on the show too. I mean,
Right.
each one of these artists that I have on each week, has such a different story to tell about their involvement with music, but almost all of them, it comes so deep from their heart, and
Yes.
it's so much a part of their soul. It's not just a job, and
Right.
that's what makes it so extraordinary. I was going to say,
It's a journey. It's a journey,
yes,
and the thing is that in life you have people who are in it for the destination, and then you have people who are in it for the journey.
exactly.
And that's these are people that are in it for the journey.
Exactly. I'm going to play another person that's been in it for the journey that you've worked with for many years, Anthony David.
AD, he is. There's so much to talk about with Anthony David. Let me put it this way about Anthony David. When I first started managing, he was the only artist I ever wanted to manage.
Wow, that says a lot.
He is so multi-dimensional what he does. He can go out and do a show acoustically with just he and his guitar. He can go out and do it with him and a guitar player. He can do it scaled down. He can do it with a full band. And his story, because I grew up, when I grew up with Bill Withers in my ear.
Oh, I love Bill Withers. Oh my God.
Yeah, it was his career mirrors Bill Withers, which is why we did the Bill Withers tribute album we did a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
When I worked with him, and I managed Anthony for 9 years. We've had a couple of #1 records, and we did the Bill Withers album because both were in the military. Anthony actually was in the 82nd Airborne. He was in the Iraq War, the first conflict, where he had 28 missions in which he was jumping out of planes. He then, when he was done with that, he migrated to the Atlanta Art Institute, where he met NDRE, and he taught her how to play the guitar.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he wrote, and he and PJ Morton were her muses in writing a lot of her earlier stuff.
My goodness.
On the first album. They were all in the same band together with her. Imagine that. But there was no more soulful of a singer when this cat wants to sing than Anthony David. And I'm like with any other artist that I've worked with over the years, and being in part of executive production or management, I listen to his work and the work that we did together over the years, and I smile. I listen to it, and it's some of the most proudest. If I wanted to say to my kids that here is a statement of what your daddy tried to do over the years, of people and artists that he wanted to work with and elevate, his music and his catalog of music, and me being a part of that would be the first thing that would come up.
Yeah, he has such a pure voice. It's almost operatic.
And the thing is, we were friends for many years. He would come flying to Cleveland and let me hear a lot of this stuff way before it came out. And then he all of a sudden said, "Hey man, you want to be my manager?" I was like, okay. Yeah. It was just as simple as that at this time. But a lot of the stuff that you heard that hit real big, especially Forevermore, I had heard that 3 or 4 years before it even reached to radio. In fact, it wasn't gonna reach radio, and he was on Purpose Records, which was the label of the great George Littlejohn and the great Russell Johnson, Purpose Music Group, which had Eric Roberson, it had Bilal, it had Algebra Blessed all on that label. And we were going to go for another single at first. And I said, halt the presses, guys. Look, I could hear this song 25 years from now. This has a hit written all over it. Let's start here. And Forevermore, which had him and the great Algebra Blessed on it, they're like a modern day Marvin Gaye, Tammy Terrell sort of duo and how they do things together. It just was magic. It was magic. It worked. And it really got him off. And the big defining moment was Barack Obama going on the Ricky Smiley show and
saying,
one of my favorite artists today is Anthony Davis, and that put us into another realm of things at that time. And he actually was invited to Chicago to, perform at his inauguration kickoff. Well, actually, it wasn't an inauguration; it was a re-election kickoff of 2012. And he's a phenomenal artist that will work to days on end because his career is not defined upon making a big splash and whatnot. It's the catalog of music why he will always have fans. And he's one of those artists that will do well in this musical environment of streaming because the catalog is enormous.
Yeah, that's so important. To build that body of work as we talked about earlier. So let me play one of his songs for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then maybe we can in a few minutes talking about Anthony also. I've always really enjoyed. These are my favorites.
I want you to remember when I profess my love. Press the button, I hope it's your recording. Every word I'm saying to you. I'm gonna do right now from this day on. Already weighing out the pros and cons. You're just the woman I want.
Let the world know it's not a game. Lasts longer than a wedding ring. Generations tattooed with the love we bring. From the seeds we sow to the time it takes to grow. Long enough to show you I won't let go of you. Without you, I'm incomplete. This love song without this beat. I'm saying that you are the man I need. Yeah. My plans just to be with you. Love to say I do.
Great track. You mentioned something we've been kind of circling around. You mentioned Eric Roberson. I've gone to see Eric perform several times, and he's funny. He does a comedy act. Besides his incredible singing. And so many of these artists are multi-purpose. They can do so many things.
As a promoter and concert producer, Eric will probably tell you this. I probably booked Eric more than anybody that he's ever worked with.
Yeah.
And it went from me paying him $1,500 a show to paying mid five figures now. And I said this to, and this was him driving the van in from Philadelphia at the time with his band in it. And I just said to Eric, I said, I guess we both did our jobs then, right? If I'm able to pay you that, and you now what you're asking for versus what it was then, I guess we all did our jobs. We're all still here. We're all meeting in the same place. But Eric is the one artist that if he was ever to ask me to work with him in a managerial component, I would turn it down.
Really? Go ahead.
Yeah.
What's the punchline?
Well, he does everything on his own.
Oh, yeah.
He does. And he's a guy that when he came out, his thing was to be a label. And to be his own label. He had went through the experience of getting dropped from Warner Brothers, getting signed, getting dropped, and then be in a publishing deal with EMI, which paid him good money. He wrote Get in the Way for Jill Scott. He wrote Emotional Roller Coaster for Vivian Green, Previous Cats for Music Soul Child. He wrote some enormous hits to spearhead the neo soul movement in the early 2000s rather. And all of that while he was living in his parents' basement. And he saved that money. And he put all of that, those enormous songs he was writing, he put it into his independent records. And so he just went for it, man. And he was his own, he would press his own records. He would, much of the same stuff that Conya dogs do, they're both 1 and 1A with it. Yeah. They decided that they were going to be the king and queens of this. And they understand and learn in the in and outs of the business so much, to where I just consider him a colleague. So if Eric calls me and he wants advice on something, it's never going to be with an invoice. It's going to be a conversation of two people, two friends, that I want to see him continue to do well because he's so important to artist independence and how you can be a Grammy award-winning artist and doing this the way you want to do it and saying to hell with majors rejecting me. I'm going to go do this and I'm going to persevere and I'm going to take everybody on a long ride with me.
You're raising an interesting point. You go back 30, 40, 50 years. Neil Young, from day one, wanted complete artistic control over his music, or he would not work with a record label. He insisted on an artistic license, and he gave up so much money because he just didn't want to become a commercial product.
Because they were his creations. I wouldn't blame them.
Yeah, exactly. And Eric's the same way, And so some of these guys get the joke. They really understand, what's really at stake. It's your reputation, it's your credibility, it's your life, not just a song.
Well, some of them don't, Mel. Too. Some of them do, some of them don't. I compare it to the masters telling slaves, "You're free to go," and then there's slaves that keep running back to the house. Like, no, I don't want to go.
Yeah.
And we still have that. Now, 95% of the music that you hear in urban R&B music, this includes the Tyrese's, this includes the Monica, the Faith Evans. It's all independent now. They just have major distribution,
right?
Which, and some of them have many majors, some of them have majors, some of them have completely independent distribution. And a lot of it, again, is that we're in a stage now where this genre can define itself based on its own rules, the same way that gospel music has over the years and country. But we have to be able to respect the outlets that make the platforms happen. Uh, Platforms like yours, where people may not ever hear music that they would hear on commercial radio.
Right.
And they have to treat those stations as if they're just as important and on the same platform as anything else. Because devices like TuneIn and on the radio box, which you can download the app and you can hear any station in the world, it means that you are on the same platform as your WHURs,
Exactly.
KOKYs of the world, or anything else that you would hear, or the Sirius XMs. It means that, but the artists have to look at that as being equally as important and include that into their marketing plan equally as important.
Yeah, absolutely. On Source Radio, we have 60,000 songs that we rotate to 60,000 new songs every 3 or 4 months. And,
Right.
And we play jazz, and we mentioned earlier jazz fusion. And, we have 6,000 listeners per hour. I have more people listening to jazz than people listen to any other radio station in the Delaware, Maryland, Virginia area. So there's obviously people that want to hear this music, and it's just not on commercial stations anymore. You can't find it. But the people want to hear it.
Again, a lot of that and a lot of the dirty tale isn't being talked about is that a lot of these dials are being flipped by political talk now.
Yeah.
So, you take 107.3 The Wave in Cleveland. During election time, when the election's coming up, a conservative media outlet that owns a bunch of stations will, instead of having it on the air, they'll just flip the call letters to something else. And next thing you know, it's either political talk or it's country music. Well, country music has 398 stations. They don't need 399, but it happens. So these outlets that are available to the artist, and if the artist considers them important, then the consumers will consider them important. Sirius XM was nothing. Yeah. Howard Stern went over there and took his millions of fans with him, and they followed him, and now it's a $1 billion operation now.
That's right.
It just takes that daringness and that understanding that you're only going to live one time for these things to happen, and doing it and understand that it's going to hurt initially, something, but through that pain, it's like practicing all week long. And if you're a football player and then you cross the goal line, well, all the pain that you've experienced that week means nothing than the adulation you get when you cross the goal line.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
So,
before the show started, Myron, you and I were talking a little bit about, we're talking about independence, and so many very talented people, just never seem to be able to get their career off the ground anymore. And, and so much has changed between the old record industry, labels controlling artists, and radio stations controlling what people heard in the music, which hasn't changed in a way, but the music is much narrower now. And we were talking about that, and you had some interesting insights into what's changed and what hasn't changed. You want to share some of that with the audience?
Oh, okay. Well, what has changed is the filter. The filter it's a double-edged sword. We start talking about A&R not being in the building any longer, or artist development.
Right.
Well, they're the cause of how things are right now, and they're also the problem of them. Their lack of presence now is also the problem. And let me explain when I say that. Because again, 95 to 98% of the artists are independent now. And in that makeup, when you have records released, there is no filter. There is no one to say, this is good. This needs to have horns coming in. This needs to have this, that before we release it. We need 3 different edits for radio for this. That person, that doesn't exist any longer. And oh, by the way, you need to go on this show, and
Yes.
say this. Okay, well, in the 60s and 70s, when you had Holland Dozier Holland, you had Gamble and Huff, you had Motown, you had Stax Records. Well, that person was the most valuable person in the room. Well, then you get to the Reagan era, and then migrating to Bill Clinton and the emergence of hip hop, and you don't have any music coming out of the schools. You don't have any music programs, and then you have hip hop, which is an amalgamation of cultural appropriation of everything together. And then what you ultimately have is, well, the A&R guy now is the weed guy who's close to the best artist on the label. He's the one that keeps the artist that's paying the bills on the label that's selling. He's the one that's keeping them high through various different means, and they give him a job. Well, at that time, and I could think of one of the more astute examples is an extremely popular artist who's an icon. Her first record was a hit record was in 1982. They fly her over from England to meet with the A&R staff at Sony, and for her new release of her record. Her new record was being released in 2005. Now her first hit record was in 1982, and the very first thing that they wanted to do was put her on a remix with 50 Cent.
And who is this, by the way?
I am not going to say who it is.
Oh, okay. All right.
But she's an icon, and they flew her over from England, and she asked the person in the room, how old are you? And this person said, I'm 19, who was our A&R. And this artist, she kindly got up and left the room, got her coat, left the room, and got back on a plane and flew back home to England. Now, that's emblematic because that person was not even old enough to even hear her biggest record.
Yep.
Okay, so that is what happened. And you begin to not have a filter any longer on what was good. And then when you start to say you're going to divest from black music on a rhythm and blues perspective, if you're a record company, but you're going to go full scale and investing in hip hop, well, you're taking the filter out the building now at that point.
Yeah.
So thus you sort of get what you get when it comes to those things. Artists now have to develop themselves. You don't have artist development that can connect with promoters, that can connect with case makers in the market, that can be able to get that artist in that market and develop everything around them. As I mentioned, when I was working on these things in the early to mid 2000s, the philosophy was, especially with hard copy CDs, you had to make sure if you got airplay in the market that you had publicity, radio, print, broadcast, and electronic media and retail locked down within a 50-mile radius. That means you had to have a relationship with all of those people within a 50-mile radius of where that airplay was happening and develop that. Now you don't have to do that now in light of streaming and in light of Spotify now being able to tell you where your fans are. You don't have independent retail any longer.
That's right.
Where you can develop that. You don't have many of the great stores that existed in DC that we used to go to. You don't have a liaison distribution that exists any longer. That I did a lot of business with over the years. So you don't have independent media like Rolling Out, which was effective because they were in the top 22 African American markets in the country. So in developing things now, it's a lot different. You know, how you have to organize a campaign. When you wanted your artists to win back in the day, you had to organize them and as if you were trying to get them elected. So you had a street team that was out that would put up posters everywhere and put signs up, and you make sure that every barbershop, hair salon, car dealership, and beeper place had access to your artist's music and or their tear down stuff or their flyers. Well, they decided at that point in time, politicians decided that the flyers and posters were a trash nuisance.
Yeah.
And so they started giving people tickets. And they had to go to court to fight those tickets. And then the internet came in, and then it was saying that you can get more eyeballs now on a click on a banner overhead on a website or down the side of a website than you could on a banner in an individual city. You see how all that has changed? So it was the industry coming down on radio and technology coming down on the business, all at the same time.
Yeah. So what's the
now,
future?
Well, the future is, again, platforms like yourself that can correlate to streams. If platforms like yourself can demonstrate how you can make streams happen in a more correlatable fashion than traditional radio, monitored or non-monitored, or terrestrial radio, then more of the marketing dollars will shift towards you and towards platforms like yours will be taken a lot more seriously than traditional radio. And then that would be a more of a divestment there than it would be, in more dollars would be put more towards source radio than anything else, or platforms that exist like this.
Yeah, I love that.
With the blocks. And that's a challenge. That's the challenge at this point in time, because again, we're in a renting records phase now. We're not selling records anymore. The music public and the consumers that consume even this platform have decided a long time ago, in the last 7 to 10 years, that they no longer want to buy music. They no longer want to have a CD that's going to collect dust on a rack in their room, in their living room. What they want to do is consume music by getting it all through their subscription service, through whoever is their service provider on their phone. So if you got Sprint or you got Verizon, there will be a platform or a few platforms that's connected to the phone. And that's how if you open up some subscription, you'll be able to get all the music that ever existed on that. And that's the way the consumer rather have it. Now, knowing that the fans exist there is a challenge for music artists, knowing that this is where the fans are. They're no longer where it used to be any longer. No longer can you go to an independent music shop on a Friday after you've got your check at noon and buy new music. Or a Tuesday on release day, when release dates were on Tuesday, and be able to be there and to support your favorite artists. Well, now you're getting everything. They're giving everything to you. They're giving nostalgia to you, and nostalgia is selling. But it's because that nostalgia has a catalog. So all of those things, all in all, are what the challenge is. I have worked and I facilitated workshops on things like this. I facilitated workshops on what brought in the headphones phenomena. And that was done. A lot of that was done on the Radiohead album In Rainbows. When they determine it to people, they say, what do you want to pay for this record? It's up to you, the consumer.
Right.
And those people who pay $8 or $10, which is normal wholesale cost for a record, well, they got a higher grade resolution download. They got 320K download. Those who didn't pay $2 to nothing, well, they got a 30K download, which was the worst download in terms of resolution. Well, if you're getting the 30K download, you need a better headphone. Well, here's the headphone industry. The Beats made it sound like it was 320K, or Sony or Bose made it sound like it was 320K. And so that was a whole other industry that came in by way of artists that went independent and sold a record from their website and told people if you didn't want to buy the record, you didn't have to buy it. And they did $4 million the first week.
Two artists, Sheryl Crow, and again, I'll go back to Neil Young. They pulled a lot of their music from streaming because of that very problem that you're talking about. And because they said it's digitized, it's in low grade, it doesn't represent the orchestration, the sound, and they just don't want to have their music denigrated that way.
Right, but if you have the right set of these in your ears, you're going to hear it like you would hear it as if you had a high grade resolution download, of the highest being at 320K for an MP3 and 24 bits for a wave.
Right.
So this is all of those auxiliary industries that, Dr. Dre didn't become a billionaire off of his music.
I know, it's off the headphones. Yep.
50 Cent didn't become a billionaire off of his music. He sold water and Dre sold headphones.
Yep.
So it's about what you're able to do now as an artist and being able to get you a good brand manager in-house that can develop all of these different revenue streams that's going to be able to sustain you across the board, and being able to have a handle on that. And that's no different than the average person who has to figure out in their lives, the average person that's making $42,000 a year, how they got to be able to create extra revenue in their house for certain projects that their kids might need to be involved with.
Sure.
No different. You just have to do it.
Yeah. I want to make a brief comment on what you're talking about the filters. Back in the 1990s, I had a friend who will go nameless, but I can tell you that he produced a South African album and a Brazilian album, and that was pretty well known. And rap music had just come out, and Sinbad was out, and some of the early rappers. And I asked him, "What do you think of the music?" And he said, "I love the poetry, but it's not music. The filters are gone. Nobody's paying attention to the music. It's syncopation," he said. "It's not music, and no one's paying attention to it, and they're doing a disservice to some of these artists who are poetically talented." And I think there's so many aspects of this lack of filters that started in the 90s.
Yeah.
And
and also too had to do with the corporatization of radio too, Mel, over time. And I'm a fan of radio in all means, whether it be terrestrial, corporate, whatever have you. But what happened was in the early 2000s, when I was growing up, you and I were growing up in Cleveland, we could hear a Anita Baker record followed by a Curtis Blow record.
Yeah.
On the same station.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, in the early 2000s, there was a line of demarcations that said we have now urban mainstream and we now have urban adult.
Yes.
Contemporary.
That's it.
And then it said, you go on 8 kids if you're 12 to 25, you go in this room over here. Adults, if you're 25 to 54, you go over here. And ultimately, that cut off communication between kids and parents.
Yes.
To where kids and parents can no longer communicate on the same frequency with each other. And that's a big deal. When those sort of things begin to happen, you then begin to create a whole nother society where you can't pass things on and they mean the same thing to your kids any longer. When my mother and father passed things on to me, it meant something because I had a connection to them and I was in the same room. We were on the same frequency of that understanding. I now have to go the extra mile to expose things to my kids. My daughter, who's 22, and she gets it. And then there's my son that's 16. And if you're too far into the rabbit hole, you can talk to them about things that are important to you, and they will look at you like you got smoking turds coming out of your mouth as a result of it.
Yeah. You know,
So
yeah, I was going to say that, one of the things that used to happen, in households, dad or mom would pull out some of the old records they had, and they would say, listen
yeah,
to this. This is where what you're listening to came from. And they would
yeah,
make
yeah.
connections. They make the connections which aren't there anymore. Those connections are gone.
Who is this guy that was in One Direction who has a big who had we got nominated for like 10 Grammys this year. He won a couple of them. Harry Styles.
Oh, I was
Okay.
thinking of John Batiste. Okay.
No, no, Harry Styles. That John Batiste won last year. Harry
Yeah.
Styles this year. Harry Styles' album sounds like something that Aha. He has songs from Aha that I heard from Aha. I heard from Fine Young Cannibals, and I heard from a
Yep.
bunch of artists that inspired that record, and he couldn't tell me any different with it from him. But that's you tell that to a kid this day and age. It's like I was in the car on a date in high school. It wasn't even a date. I was just in the car with my sister and her female friends in college, and Ice Cube's well no the Ronald Isley's what's the song Footsteps in the Dark was playing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and the young lady said he got that from Ice Cube.
A little backwards. A little backwards. Huh? Yeah, that's what I love. That's what I love about guys like John Batiste. Who are sampling that old music and keeping that music alive today, and for a new generation. I mean, I love the way the stuff he does. And
Yeah,
he's a classically trained musician.
yeah, and you know what? Listening to John Batiste stuff like his, and I got hit most recently to a rock band that took me back, man. And I blast them in my car right now. I bought the CD. I have a Pioneer system. I got one of them old school Mercury Sables. Okay, so I'm boogieing this band, and you may want to pick them up. Greta Van Fleet.
Greta Dash Fleet. I don't know that one.
No, Greta Van Fleet.
Greta Van Fleet. Okay.
They're a rock band out of Michigan.
I've heard them.
They
Yeah, you
they
mentioned it.
amazing music, amazing.
Yeah.
And I lose my mind when I play them in the car now. It's these guys sound like Deep Purple or Black Sabbath meets Jane's Addiction.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, having that one black guy and that we grew up with that had listened to this stuff, I'm able to make those connections. But I bought this CD, and the new one it is like Enemy of the Garden State is incredible.
I'm gonna check
Incredible
it out.
music.
I'm gonna check it out.
So, but I've got to be lifting out of here in a few minutes in particular. But I just wanted to say I really enjoyed being on this platform with you, man. It's
Look,
glad everything you're doing.
Myron, it was wonderful, and I appreciate everything that you're doing in music. And all the wonderful artists that you keep bringing out for everybody. So I want to thank you for being on the show.
There was one that we missed as well that is really like the epicenter of all this, and that's Dwelle. But we can get to him some other time because
I want to have you back again. Definitely.
Dwelle is Kanye West's biggest records were done with Dwelle, and I want to talk about that too down the road as well.
I'll definitely have you back. Love to. I enjoyed the whole conversation.
Yep.
And I want to thank you for your time tonight. I'm sure all the fans really appreciate everything you're doing.
Likewise, here, man. And definitely, we're going to keep doing what you do with you and supporting you and supporting platforms like this. And I can name them. I can name them as Neil Soul Cafe, the Soul Cafe New York, but with Francis J. Pepper Thomas, Hot Pepper Show at KAZI, DJ Benzo at Power 88 in Las Vegas, and the actual general manager of Power 88 is Craig Knight. That's Gladys Knight's nephew and Bubba Knight's son. And again, these are stations that are terrestrial, that are independent. Sharon J is on at KAZI in Austin. VKX, Missy E. James Lewis in WTCC in Springfield. I just mentioned Missy E, I'm sorry, in Macon. WVKX in Macon, Love 103.7. These are all stations that are like yourself, that are making a difference in the marketplace for many of these artists. And then they actually it's a story to tell to those commercial stations that this legion of fans come from what you guys do. So
Yeah, when I started this station, I went through a friend who's in the UK, who's affiliated with the BBC, and what I wanted was what you did. I wanted distribution. I wanted people to hear this music, and through the BBC and through this my licensee, my licensor, we have 9,000 affiliated terrestrial internet stations. So I immediately started to reach a vast audience with this music that I thought was so essential. So look, I appreciate your support. I want to have you back on again. You do wonderful things with music, Myron. I got one last question. Are you related to David Ruffin?
I just recently found that out, that we have a related connection. About 4 years ago, I found that out through someone who I met at a wedding reception, who had documentation out of the Tennessee Citations Office of Vital Statistics, and they sent it to me. And apparently his dad Eli and my grandfather Ernest Mitchell Ruffin, that died in '56, were kin. In fact, their Ruffin heritage extended through Mississippi, mine through Alabama, but the Ruffin family owned more land than any other black family in northern Alabama and in Mississippi through the sharecropping business. And they used to season the men the same way in the sharecropping business. When they came up short, they used to tie them to a fence and whoop them with a bullwhip.
Wow.
That was what my father experienced, and that also was what David experienced as well too, which is why so many of them migrated and came up north.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, it's sad history, but through carousing and through racial laws that were passed that swindled them out of money, things of that nature, we end up losing a lot of that land in particular. There
are some things you and I should talk about, off show. I've done a lot of research on somebody named Frank Church, who was very instrumental in Beale Street in Memphis, who was an ex-slave.
Wow.
He was an ex-slave, and he started black entertainment, literally. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it at some point.
And Memphis is so much history, because you had so many people who white and black, that would break racial color lines. And I was just reading about a wrestler who was in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Memphis by the name of Sputman Monroe, because he used to actually, that's where the Crow's Nest started in Memphis, where they would put black people high up in the bleachers and stuff at fights and at stuff in that nature. And so what happened was, he would actually go down to Beale Street, dress up, and hang out with black people, because he was a heel and they were fans of his. And they would fill up the Crow's Nest, and then he would even pay a black lawyer to go to court to defend him when he got charged with mopery at that time, which is hanging out with black people at the time.
You may know one of my friends, Larry Dodson from the Barkays.
Yes.
Yeah, Larry's a good friend of mine, and Larry told me that the keyboard player for the Barkays was a white dude. And he lived in a white neighborhood, but he didn't like the music, so he went to a black high school and joined the Barkays, and he was killed in that infamous plane crash.
That was they were with Otis Redding and Booker T and the MGs, and they all on Stax, and Stax was that interracial component with that. Yep.
Yes,
Yeah,
and he told me that Memphis was totally interracial. It was never an issue.
yeah, yep.
Yeah. Well, look, again, thank you so much. You take care of yourself, my friend, and we'll talk
You
soon.
too, man.
Okay.
You too. This was a lot longer than I thought, but it was well worth it. I just
Thank
hope
you.
I didn't. I
I
just hope
feel the
I didn't
same
give
way.
up a book. I hope I didn't give up a book during this conversation.
This is my longest show yet, but it's well worth it. Thank you.